and welcome once again to the Metagame, the live streaming show here, brought to you by me, Chaz Marler of Pair of Dice Paradise and the Dice Tower on the Dice Tower's YouTube channel. And the way that this show works is we're going to be talking not only about board games, but also talking about board games sometimes. And the way the show is structured, if you've never seen it before, is I'm going to present a short topic, and then afterwards, I'm going to turn to the YouTube chat during this live stream portion. I'm going to turn to the chat, and I'm going to look for comments from people, and we'll have an informal Q&A session about the topic or anything else that comes up after my presentation. And if you want your statement or question to be addressed during the live chat portion, be sure to add the fancy dancy little hashtag TMG to your statement, because the way it works is when it comes to the Q&A portion, I'm going to use my web browser search to search for that hashtag to highlight all the comments that have that hashtag in it. So if you want your hashtag brought up, if you want your question brought up, make sure to use that hashtag so that I notice it. As always, I'm not able to get to every single question that we encounter, but I do go through and try to read through the rest of the comments after the show just to make sure no one gets missed. So hopefully that'll help foster an excellent discussion. All right, so I'm just going to double check the chat here to make sure that our audio and video is good, which it seems like we're broadcasting strongly. So let's start with today's topic, which is conventions, and specifically board game conventions. And are they really worth it? See, because I myself admit I'm a bit of a homebody. I've never had much desire at all to travel the world and to see the world. There's a few things on my bucket list I'd like to accomplish and see, but travel and stuff has never really been on a top priority for me. I always enjoy a lot just being at home in a comfortable space that I like, and that's one of the things I enjoy doing, things, activities and stuff, and just in my comfortable little home space. So it used to be that the thought of traveling and going through all the rigmarole of going to a convention just never ever appealed to me at all. It was just not something I even wanted to do. But within the last 2 years, that has completely flipped around for me. I've gone from having no desire to attend conventions to actually looking forward to them. And like I said, it started about 2 years ago. And we'll talk about some of the pros and cons and some of the things that led to this change in perspective. And we'll see how this compares to the chat crowd and also some other questions for the chat crowd. But before we get to the chat crowd, let me please continue talking about myself. The first conventions, board game conventions, and I'm not counting local conventions, I'm talking about ones where we actually have to travel. You have to buy some sort of ticket to get somewhere else. The first conventions I attended were last year. Last year, I was fortunate enough to be able to attend Gen Con, Dice Tower Con, and Board Game Geek Con, or BGG Con. Gen Con's in August, Dice Tower Con is around the 4th of July, and BGG Con's in November. I was fortunate enough to be able to attend those. And this year, I'm fortunate enough again to be able to attend, I'll be attending Origins, which is next week, which is why we're talking about conventions, because convention season is about to kick off next week with Origins. Then Dice Tower Con in July, and Gen Con in August. So some of these conventions are 2 to 3 weeks apart from one another and involve literally like being on a plane 8 to 10 hours. So what changed my perspective to want to go to these conventions, and what made it worthwhile and something that's exciting to me? Because first of all, let's talk about the cons of cons. I mean, a board game convention is not an easy thing to get to, and that was one of the deterrents. For example, the very first thing that you got to do if you want to show up at one of these conventions is you have to obtain a badge. Of course, you got to get your entrance badge. And especially for conventions with a limited amount of tickets that they sell, those badges can sell out really, really fast. I mean, Dice Tower Con this year, I believe, sold out in under 10 minutes. I believe they have about 1,500 to 1,700 tickets that they sell, and those were gone that quickly. If you weren't right there at your web browser when the tickets went on sale, you didn't get one, and you got put on a waiting list. And not only the tickets, but there's other things like getting a hotel that you have to be in the right place at the right time for as well, but we'll get to that. So first of all, you have to actually go out of your way to try and get these tickets and schedule your day around getting them. And never mind the expense, but having to actually be in the right place at the right time to get the tickets. So that's one thing that's kind of a pain. Another thing too is, of course, not only scheduling your time around getting the tickets, but then you have to schedule your work life around being able to go. You have to get time off work. And I know that is something that a lot of people, several people I know, it greatly diminishes the amount of conventions that they can attend because they simply can't get the time off work to do it. So you have to have either vacation time built up or just have some sort of flexibility in doing that. And then once you allocate and get permission to be able to go, then you got to get there. And then there's travel expenses. And I'm in Oregon on the West Coast. And I'm kind of, apparently I've been told I'm kind of out in the boondocks. I'm not in a big city at all. I'm in a town of about 5,000 people. I'm a suburb of Eugene, which has about 120,000 people. But I'm in this little town. So airfare expenses to get these conventions is a lot more expensive for me oftentimes than it is if I was flying out of like Seattle or a larger airport or something. And so to get to coordinate and get the best travel expenses, I'll have to start searching for airfare deals at least a month or two sooner than I would have otherwise. And I'll start watching airfare rates and wait for them. Google Flights has a really good tool where you can kind of select your tickets ahead of time and then start watching them. And it'll show you day to day. It'll make a graph showing the pricing trends. And so you can watch the trends and actually watch for the airfare tickets to go down in price, which is usually around 5 weeks or so before a trip. The airfare rates seem to go down the most, and then grab the tickets right then. But you have to be prepared and do a lot of preparations ahead of time when you live out in the sticks. So the travel expenses are another thing that you have to consider. And then, of course, the travel time. Coming from Oregon, going to Dice Tower Con, that's an 8 to 10 hour flight. Not to mention the multiple layovers and stuff. So it takes an entire day just to travel to a convention lots of times. So not only you have like the 3 to 5 days of the convention, figure tacking on a day to travel there and a day to travel back. So again, more travel time. But then once you get there, you got to figure out where you're going to stay. And that leads to a whole other set of hurdles at a lot of these conventions, which is the lodging or the hotels. For example, Gen Con, especially the last couple of years, Gen Con has 60,000 people attend Gen Con in Indianapolis in August. And there's a lot of hotels around the convention center, but those still sell out really quickly. In fact, with Gen Con, it's not uncommon for people, what Gen Con does is similar to the conventions where they'll put their badges on sale at a certain day and time. The Gen Con hotels go on sale a certain day and time. You can't get into it unless you are in front of your computer ready to go. And Gen Con's housing system has even gotten more ridiculous because instead of just letting people in, what would happen is people would get in and the hotel registration would be unlocked at a certain time of day. Everyone would then be ready and hit those housing website those hotel websites all at the same time and bring the servers down. So Gen Con started instituting a lottery system where now, instead of everyone trying to register for their hotel at once, everybody pre-registers, gets on a waiting list, and then they dole out. They let like a couple hundred people at a time throughout the day when they launch the hotels. They let several hundred people at a time come in and start being able to register for hotels. So now, instead of just hammering the server, you not only have to hammer the servers, but you have to be lucky enough to be early enough in that lottery to be allowed access to get a hotel before they sell out. So that's not great. So I know people that will have multiple web browser windows open, and they will be refreshing each one because of the websites load so slowly from being hammered from everyone trying to get their hotel room that one browser window won't load, so they'll have like multiples open, to just refreshing each one to try and get one that will load. And even when you get the browser windows to load, well, then you got to get your room in time. Because, for example, BGGCon for this year, I was considering attending that, but literally when BGG hotel rooms went on sale for this year, I got onto the BGG website, and by the time I found a room, and I went to the page to fill out my payment information to purchase and reserve my room, and literally by the time I had filled out that checkout page and submitted it in that amount of time, the entire hotel sold out. And just in the amount of time it took me to fill out that page, my room was sold out from under me that I was trying to buy, and the whole hotel was booked. And it's ridiculous. But the reason it's so ridiculous is because every single major board game convention seems to continue to be growing in size because more and more people are interested in going to these conventions, which I think is a good thing. But all these additional people going to these conventions can lead to the next possible issue that can prevent people from wanting to go, which is simply the crowds that are there at a convention. Like I said, Gen Con has over 60,000 people that attend it. And the mob, there's videos online that you can see of when they open the doors on the very first day. There's just mobs and mobs and mobs of people, just this crush of people comes in through the doors and just crowd the entire convention center within minutes. And then walking around, you gotta watch out for this guy with a huge backpack, this one with a trolley, there's someone with a stroller, here's someone that's dressed up as Cookie Monster and an octopus, and oh no, and it can be a hassle just to get around some of these conventions. And then when you finally get there, and you're finally there, and you work your way through the crowd, it can be one of the least conducive environments to actually trying to game. It's crowded, it's hard to find people, and so the noise and such at some of these conventions, I oftentimes have a little bit of trouble carrying on a conversation in some of these gaming halls because of just the dull roar that's going on in them. I know at Gen Con, from having to speak over the crowd noise working at the booth, by the last day, my voice was just absolutely shot, just from having to speak over the crowds. So I guess in short, it's noisy. So anyway, before I started attending conventions, that was pretty much the checklist that I kept for myself to continually talk myself out of going to them. And that's fine. No one says you have to go to these conventions. Not going to board gaming conventions doesn't make you any less of a board gamer or gamer in general. It's just something to do as an option. So what changed? What flipped me around from having this checklist to easily rationalize with myself not going to being really excited to go? And honestly, there's a checklist of things. I'll go through the main things that are good about conventions, and then I'll mention the main thing that it is for me. Because when you get to a convention, there's several perks. The Gen Cons, the Origins, even the Dice Tower Cons, and the BGG Cons. Sometimes at these, especially the Origins and Gen Con, at these conventions, there's new releases, games that are just literally like being unpacked off a direct shipment from the printers. Sometimes like pallets of games that are like literally the most brand new that they could possibly be. And so you'll have the opportunity sometimes to demo and even purchase games that you've been looking forward to weeks, sometimes a couple months before they even hit mainstream retail. So there's that early bird aspect of being able to obtain and play and experience some of these games sooner than you would have beforehand. But even then, they will eventually hit the mainstream stores and everywhere else. But that is a potential perk. And the other thing too is, of course, once you are at that convention, even though it's crowded and noisy, you're gonna see things at these conventions that you wouldn't have gotten to otherwise. Lots of the booths have these amazing displays. There was one at Gen Con last year that had these like 15 feet tall, giant fiberglass robot-looking things that went along with some game, and they was really neat just to look at some of the art and the things that the companies had set up in their booths. And a lot of the miniatures companies have these amazing, huge dioramas set up with all the miniatures and things like that, and it's just fantastic. And sometimes they have them set up to play at, and so you can play on these neat environments that you never would be able to be otherwise. And I've mentioned like cosplayers and stuff. You're going to see people in costume sometimes, some of them that dressed up, which is just a neat experience to see. And there's large tournaments, of course, that you can partake in. Some of them are free, some are paid, but the amount of people and such that can partake in these tournaments dwarfs the amount of competition and such that you'd be able to have at many other events. And speaking of events, there's also special events and shows. There's every publisher seems to put on some sort of special presentation. The Dice Tower does live shows, sometimes multiple ones and such at a lot of these conventions. So being able to experience and meet and see a lot of those shows, those people are one of the things. And while you're there meeting and seeing how things operate, that's one of the next neat points is just being there and immersed in the convention atmosphere. You learn a lot more about how the board game industry works. And if you're interested in becoming involved in one way or another, in a professional sense, in the board game industry, attending these conventions actually is something that I think makes them a lot more of a priority. If you just are a casual gamer and such, it's one thing. But if you actually want to be involved in the industry in a professional sense, I think that these conventions make it exponentially easier to get involved, because you're meeting the publishers, you're seeing the publishers, you're hearing the conversations, you're there, and you have a presence instead of just being an avatar on the internet or some random email that a publisher receives. You can establish a relationship with these people, and that goes a long way towards any sort of interaction with the board game industry. And not only the publishers too. I mean, one of the things that you'll experience is, of course, seeing people that you only get to see a couple of times a year at these conventions. Suzanne Sheldon, who does a couple segments on Dice Tower's Board Game Breakfast, and just all over the internet and Twitter and stuff. Suzanne lives one state over from me in Washington State. We probably live with like no more than 6 hours driving time difference between each other. We're, all things considered, we're pretty close together. But Suzanne and I always joke that the only times that we've actually seen each other in person have been in Florida and Texas. And Oh, also at Gamma in Nevada this year. So it's like we're working our way from the East Coast over to the West Coast, getting closer and closer. But we've seen each other in person 3 times, but it's always been in these other weird out-of-state conventions. But we've gotten to see each other there, at these things. And being able to interact with Suzanne and the other podcasters and vloggers and YouTube channel people that I've gotten to know through our work in the board games industry, getting able to hang out with these people is excellent. And lots of times there's even interactions that at these conventions that you just won't have online. At Gen Con last year, I met Jonathan Moriarty from the Snakes Cast. If you listen to the Dice Tower audio podcast, you've probably heard Jonathan, some of his contributions. And what's really interesting is we had communicated by Twitter and email a couple of times beforehand, but it wasn't until we met face to face at BGGCon. We just stumbled onto each other in the crowd a couple of times. It wasn't even on purpose. We just, like, hey, hi. Just in talking person to person, we discovered we had a lot more in common with each other in some aspects of our personality and stuff than we ever imagined. And it was just amazing. And that type of stuff never would have come up just on Twitter, direct messages, or email, or stuff like that. And so it was that personal, in face-to-face connection that really illuminated and made that relationship a lot more special. As one of the things I'm looking forward to this year is if Jonathan is at BGGCon again this year, is at Gen Con again this year, tracking him down just to say hi, because it was such a special experience from last year's. And of course, coming back to the gaming at a convention, the ability to get to spend time doing something that you enjoy with so many others that have a similar interest is always just fantastic. To know that we're all basically there because we have a common interest and a common ground. And sometimes we like to debate things about board games. Sometimes we just want to play. Sometimes we like just talking about board games. Having that common thread that ties us all together is another thing that's really special. But of all those bullet points, the main one that turned my perspective around on going to conventions was the people aspect. Like I said, last year, 2015, was the first year that I was able to go to Gen Con and Dice Tower Con and BGG Con. In the year before that, in 2014, 2014 was the year that I started to get to know a lot of the other podcasters and YouTubers and stuff in the board game realm. And I started to establish friendships with them. And in 2014, I watched from home, I watched them go to Gen Con and tweet their experiences and vlog their experiences. I watched them go to BGG Con. And it made me realize that if I had an opportunity to go and hang out with these people who were becoming my friends online and have since become even stronger friends, that was really what I wanted to do personally. It wasn't to me about the circus atmosphere of some of these conventions or getting new games early or even playing the games, because I can do that at my local game club and local conventions. It was these people that I watched their stuff, had talked to a bit on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube comments and stuff. And I wanted to get to know them better and have the opportunity to, say hi to some of them and hang out all day with some of the others. And that's the thing that flipped it around for me. And having the opportunity to hang out with these people is what is making me not be able to wait for Origins. That's the number one thing that I'm looking forward to. And that's also why when people like me are like working the booth at Origins, I'll be working the Dice Tower booth. I'll also be helping out PGS, Passport Game Studios, as much as possible in my spare moments as well, but also hopefully hang out with people. But no matter where I am, and a lot of us, if you see us, don't hesitate to come by and say hi, because that type of going through all that trouble to come and see people and say hi, that's why I'm going there. So I know others must feel that way. So if you come all that way and you have the opportunity, please do come by, say hi, and establish your own relationship. with me and the others that you enjoy, because that's really what it's all about, is the community of gamers and establishing those relationships. Those are the things that we'll carry with us from the convention. We'll be carrying games and things back with us, sure, but those relationships are really the things that will carry back with us, that will last far longer than any cardboard and meeples and plastic bits ever will. So there you go. The cons and the pros and why I personally have changed my perspective on going to conventions. All right, enough me. Let's turn over to the YouTube comment area. And what I want to know is, do you go to conventions? If so, why? If not, why? So what keeps you from going or encourages you to go? Which conventions do you go to? And what have been some of your favorite and maybe least favorite convention experiences? Let me know in the chat. Probably have to work our way up to that. So I'm going to go to the chat and start with the earlier comments, and we'll work our way towards the newer chat comments, and we'll see where the conversation goes from there. Alrighty, everyone. Hello, chat area. I'm going to do my little search here. All right. Gonna go. Here we go. All right. Here we go. We'll start the chat as we usually do with a chat from chat area regular attender Kabuki Kid. Hello, ma'am. Always nice to see you. Who mentions that I'm like you were, Chaz. I never had a big drive to go to conventions. Some are just for shopping. I'm happy waiting for those games, and some are for gaming. I can game at home or with my group. I've had a hard time with the idea of paying to game, at least paying a decent amount to game. I guess that I have a hard time finding what interests me greatly at convention. Nothing really sings to me, I guess. And like I said, I think there is a lot of similarity there. To me, the gaming at conventions, oddly enough, is just the frosting on the cake. But it's true. I try to go to conventions. When I go to conventions, most of them, like Gen Con and Origins, I try to have something to do. I want to go there as someone who's doing something. If I wanted to just hang out and game, I like BGG Con for that and Dice Tower Con for that. But some of the bigger conventions, yeah, I want to be a cog in the industry machinery, doing stuff, talking to people and stuff like that. So yeah, like I said, like you hinted at there, yes, that's one thing about conventions. I think each convention has a different feel, different atmosphere, almost a different purpose. So finding out what you want to get out of a convention, especially since, paying to go to one with the expenses, finding out what you want to get out of a convention and then picking the convention that best fits a most conducive environment to pull that off. I think that's really good to do when considering going to conventions, because they're each different. Halfhand83 says, I am going to Gen Con for the first time this year. We'll see how I feel afterwards, whether I still want to go to more conventions. Yeah, I was, Gen Con was the first major convention, out of state, I'll put it that way. Gen Con was the first out of state convention that I went to. So I went from conventions from a couple hundred people to maybe 1,300 people to 60,000 people. And it was a bit of a culture shock there. So I've heard, and as long as you know what to expect, I don't know if I agree with this, but I've heard, don't go to Gen Con as your first board game convention. It's just too much. But if you know what to expect and you're acclimated to it, I don't necessarily agree that, don't go to it first one. I'd be interested to know if Gen Con, you say you're going to your Gen Con the first time. I'm wondering if Gen Con is your first big convention or if this is just the first time going to Gen Con. But anyway, let me know. Scott mentions, what gives you the determination to keep making videos? Ooh. Okay, well, this is a little bit of an aside. You know what, Scott? I'm going to come back to that in more detail. I'll answer it a little bit here just to be polite. Don't want to do you a disservice, but that's such a good question. I think I'm going to come back to that as a dedicated episode. What gives you the determination to keep making videos? Because there's a lot that goes into it, actually. I'm going to say just the main thing, I think, is what got me started doing videos in the first place, which is I've always drawn or filmed stuff, or just I've always been happiest when I've had a creative outlet. And I love publishing. I love making something and showing it to people and entertaining them with it. So when I started making the videos, I didn't have a creative outlet, and it was making me sad not to have a creative outlet like that. So that's what led me, I needed something to do creatively. So that's what led me to start making the videos. And it made me feel like I found my personality again. I became myself again, if that makes any sense. And so part of it, the determination to keep going, is the fulfillment of having this creative outlet. It's just hardwired into who I am. And I get a lot of satisfaction and fulfillment out of coming up with an idea, executing it, and publishing it. So anyway, but like I said, excellent topic for a whole episode, so we'll come back to that eventually. But for now, we're going to continue on with the current comments. That was an excellent question, by the way. Thank you very much. Satya has another, comes in here with our next comment, which is, since you like going to conventions now, when can we expect to see you at Essen? We want to threaten you with hugs. Oh, Satya, I did not, I've seen you before in the chat, and I can't remember if you were in the live Las Vegas game, but I did not realize that you were in Europe. Awesome. So, Satya, interesting news about Essen. Well, not really news, but interesting trivia about Essen. I talked about my not fears, but my dislike of travel and worrying about expenses and just getting there, and how that kept me from going to so many conventions. Well, I'm working my way up. Essen in Europe is still so big of a trip that it's still, I'm wary of it. However, interestingly enough, my wife is kind of the opposite. She has actually, a couple of years ago, had the opportunity with another group to go to Europe for a short vacation. And I told her, take advantage, do it. And she did it and loved it. And she said, hey, if you ever get the chance to go to Essen, let's do it. And let's make it like a vacation. And I want to go with you. So my wife is on board and encouraging me to figure out how to get to Essen. So I have that support. So if Essen ever becomes a possibility, it may happen because I have support from multiple outlets to do it. But no plans yet to do it because I haven't got over my own mental hurdles of that much travel. So anyway, now you know. Trevor. Trevor's going to bring up a good point here. Trevor mentions, I have 3 young kids and most of my time is split between business, family, and gaming with kids. I attend 2 local conventions for $50 for the weekend, both about 500 to 1,000 people, where I can play war games. I sign up for a few slots at specific games, and that is my wargaming for the year for the most part. That is an excellent point about children. Some people, take their children with them. My daughter is currently 9. I think she's still a bit young to go, definitely for Gen Con and stuff. I think she's still a bit young to go to Dice Tower Con, even though it's a lot more family friendly. Not because of the atmosphere, but because I think she's still young enough that she would not enjoy gaming all day and stuff for that many days in a row, 3 to 5 days. We did go, my wife and her went with me to Dice Tower Con last year. And what we did to kind of accommodate that is we attempted to split it up as a family vacation. One day, we'd take it easy and relax, and I'd be at the convention. The next day, we went to Disney World. And then the next day, we relaxed and spent time at the convention. And then the next day, we went to a Discovery Cove or other attractions down there in Florida. And that had mixed results. It wasn't actually as relaxing a family vacation as we were hoping it would be, because we always felt like we were switching our schedules around and figuring who was doing what. So it can be, if you have children, making a family vacation of it can be something to do, but I think it's something that actually requires more planning. It won't actually make it easier for you. It'll actually require more planning, and it can actually add more stress to the trip. So that's something to keep in mind. Anyway, so with young kids though, with children, that can definitely be something that will change your convention attending plans, whether you take them or whether you have someone watching them while you go. It's definitely something that adds extra layer of planning to it. Penger mentions, if I have money left for traveling, I prefer going on a holiday out hiking and have preferably few people around. I definitely can see that. Like I said, for the longest time, I felt that exact same way. And the thing about the conventions that changed my mind about it, again, wasn't experiencing the crowds and the cacophony of it. It was the people, and basically having time to spend with people that shared a common interest and the friends I've made. So if the people that I wanted to hang around with weren't going to these conventions, I probably would also opt for a quiet holiday out hiking or just something local like that. So definitely there's multiple aspects of the convention scene that appeal to everybody. So it's going to have a different appeal for everybody there, different things. Kabuki mentions again, the thing that is starting to interest me more and more in going to a con is so I can meet some of the people I chat with online. Like you, Chaz. Well, hopefully there's others. Hopefully you have a larger breadth of potential people to chat with at these conventions. Otherwise, I'm not sure you get your money worth out of it. Mar space K, so I'm not sure if it's Mar K or Mar K, but whoever you are, nice to meet you here, mentions, do you feel societal pressure to be more excited about travel in general? I find that sometimes people stigmatize people who like to stay at home. Oh, that's an excellent question. Do you feel that societal pressure? Do you feel societal pressure to be more excited about travel in general? Barely. I'm gonna say. But again, that might be the way I'm wired. There is some peer pressure in a way. Like I said, back in 2014, when I saw these people that I wanted to get to know better and wanted to hang around with, I saw them tweeting and stuff, the great times they were having at Steak and Shake and other places, and I realized it didn't make me, you know what, it's different. It didn't make me feel pressured like that, oh my goodness, as a YouTuber, I should be at this convention. That's the thing that's barely. The difference was it made me realize that it came from within that, hey, I want to be around these people. I want to hang out with them. These people are becoming my friends. I want to be there. So instead of being an external pressure, it was an internal one of, I feel like I'm missing out because I want to do that. Now, as for staying at home and stuff, so I think it's different from where that pressure came from. But and the second part of your question about people being stigmatized, people who like to stay at home, I don't know about that because I'm in that same camp. I enjoy staying at home. So I kind of have built mental barriers in a way around me where any sort of pressure about, go out, don't be at home. I've kind of over my lifetime, I think I've tuned that out because I've decided the type of person I want to be when it comes to my spare time. So I've learned to, I think, ignore a lot of that, but I can definitely see it being there. But I think it boils down to, again, instead of listening to those outside pressures and being influenced by them, listening to them, filtering out what's important, but listening to what's important to yourself. Because at the end of the day, that's really who you have to answer to, is that little voice inside of who you want to be. So that's kind of psycho-babbly there. I apologize if that's too far out there, but that's the best answer to your question I have, and I hope it is a suitable answer. All right. Let's continue on. Let's see here. Kabuki Kid mentions again, DexCon is close to me and only a couple weeks away, but I'm still not planning to go to that one. I could just drive there daily and not have to pay for a room. Hate driving though. There's a convention about 2 hours away from me called Game Storm in Vancouver, Washington, just outside of Portland, Oregon, just across the river, the Columbia River. Anyway, who cares where it is? The point is that it's within driving distance, and it has about 1,300 people, I think. And I went to it year before last, and I was able to drive there, and I enjoyed it. But they had some issues with the hotel. The hotel accidentally last year double booked the convention space, so they had a lot of space problems, and it was really unfortunate. But those type of problems prevented me from going. I didn't want to be one more person in the way with their limited space. It wasn't that amount of conflict or problem with the setup of the convention was enough to prevent me driving just 2 hours to it. So I can definitely understand that even if a convention is more local, there's still going to be other contributing factors that are going to change whether or not the conventions are worth it to us. Hopefully, if it's something we enjoy and we want to do, hopefully it works out for us. But at the same time, kind of what Mark said, hopefully it doesn't make us feel obligated to go to these things. Hopefully we still are able to attend the ones that we want to attend without feel like we're hurting someone's feelings or missing out or anything like that. All right. Pangur mentions again, I can go to Essen once a year because I live near there, wow, and have a train ticket to get there for free. So I only have to pay admission fees, which are quite good, and I never would be able to pay more. That is so excellent to be able to have that. I wish that we had a better public transportation system available here, because especially where I live, anywhere you want to go, you're driving there. It's even like a half hour to the airport. So anyway, being that close to something like Essen must be fantastic. There's a couple of people, podcasters I know, that are within driving distance of Gen Con, and they always talk about, oh yeah, I just drove in, I'm staying at a friend's house, or I just drove in from home each day. And it's just like being able to cut out that amount of travel middleman, it must just be fantastic. It's a great thing to be able to take advantage of. Okay, sorry, the comments jumped a little bit there. I'm finding out where I was. Here we go. Equip Kilt is equipped and ready with their statement that I was planning for a full year just to my... I'll read their statement correctly this time. I was planning for a full year just to go to my first convention, Dice Tower. Jokingly told my brother that he should fly down to split a room with me, and he said sure. Took me a while to find him a ticket. Yeah, be careful what you say about these things. You never know when someone will jump right on that bandwagon, and you got to figure out the accommodations for everyone. But that's excellent that you were able to obtain the ticket, because I know a lot of people were stuck on the Dice Tower Con waiting list. And I believe that Dice Tower Con is going to at least double in size within the next 2 years, and I think get up to 7,000 or more people within the next 3 to 4 years or so. There are plans for it to continue to grow, which is great. Dice Tower Con was an amazing, excellent atmosphere. Where Gen Con is all about the circus and seeing things and new games and making interactions with the publishers and big FaceTime in there. Dice Tower Con was about a bunch of people hanging out, having fun, playing games, and just relaxing. And like I said, every convention has a different atmosphere and feel, and so Dice Tower Con really accommodated that. Kabuki mentions, I wish my best friend was more into gaming more, because then I would go with him, and that would easily be more comfortable for me. Having a travel... That's something about conventions that I didn't mention. Travel companions. Is it worth going with someone else to a convention? And interestingly enough, I'm split down the middle about that. It's hard to say, but it is nice to have a travel companion with you. My wife is infinitely smarter about everything than I am. And so even things like how to navigate the airport, how to find where you're going, and actually getting to there in some of these airports we'd never been in before during our layovers and stuff, she was on point. And if it was just me, I would have been standing around, missed a flight, not knowing where I was. First time I was in the Seattle airport alone, I got lost for 25 minutes. I couldn't find how to get out of the gate. So with her, we went through, I can't remember, San Francisco, Denver, and the Miami airport, and she was leading the way and we were just going. So I learned a lot from her. So having a travel companion helped get things done, and done well. So sometimes teamwork can make traveling a lot easier. The other side of the coin, though, is, to be honest, having a travel companion sometimes can split your attention. There might be events or tournaments or things that you want to go to sometimes that they don't. And so, it can lead to, and this doesn't happen with everybody and everything's different, but it could potentially lead to feeling like you are abandoning them or hurting their feelings or something, and it can diminish the experience for everyone. So, of course, every friendship and stuff is different, but so there's kind of those two sides of that coin. Me personally, like I said, I'm on both sides. There's times where I'm glad to have a companion. There's also times where I worry if the things I want to do are being more of a burden to my companion. So it's different for everyone, but that's definitely something to think about. If you can have a travel companion, is it worth doing when you're going to a large convention? I think it really depends on what you want to get out of the convention and travel experience. Continuing on, 007 Design states, I have a lot of friends that think I go to conventions to get stuff cheap, and I have to explain to them that it's not a yard sale. You'll save maybe a coupon's worth of dollars, but not usually anything. Yeah, that's true. I actually had a little bit of sticker shock when I went to Gen Con. I was ridiculously expecting everything at Gen Con from the publishers' booths to be like wholesale priced. And I had this sticker shock when I got there and everything was normal, regular MSRP priced. And it took a minute to realize, yeah, a convention isn't a big sale or a big discount area. The games are going to be normal MSRP price most of the time. There are bargains, there are deals, and especially when you're shopping around. But and after you think about it, well, it makes sense, because the publishers go through a lot of expense to, like I said, lots of times they are shipping in pallets of games by air freight, extra special delivery from the printers, literally like the day after they come off the printers. They're scrambling to get these games in, and that's expensive. Then there's the booth space and the advertising and all the frills that go into it. I'm not saying what their pricing in the booths should be, but after I thought about it a while, it made sense of, oh, yeah, it would make sense that the games are going to be regular price. So if you're going to a convention with the goal of just getting stuff on the cheap, that is definitely not the reason why to go to a convention, because you'll be unpleasantly surprised. The Dice Tower Cruise originally seemed silly to me until I learned more about it. Now I see that it may be a great option, not only for the value, but because my boyfriend or best friend, BF, might actually go in for that. That's one we didn't even talk about. Was now there's starting to Board Game Geek and Dice Tower Con, or Board Game Geek and Dice Tower both have these cruise trips that they're planning for board gaming cruises, and that's a whole nother atmosphere to board gaming. I mean, not only will you have gaming, but you're surrounded by water. So that's a whole nother thing to consider. I don't know where I'm going with that, so let's continue on. Gare Rivero mentions differences between Dice Tower Con and Dice Tower Cruise. Should I go to both? That is a question I can't answer because I've never been on the Dice Tower Cruise. Well, it hasn't existed yet. So I'm not going to be at the Dice Tower Cruise, so I don't know. But the Dice Tower forums on Board Game Geek, I bet someone there would be able to answer that question. Satya mentions again, that since Essen is the only convention worth going to in her area, I managed to go there almost every year for nearly 30 years. Usually only one of the days now, not all four. Wow. I'd be interested in finding out how Essen has changed in those 3 decades. I always hear stories about how Gen Con has morphed and evolved. Gen Con used to be a lot more, I believe, about wargaming and RPGs and stuff like that, and it has really morphed and changed into a board gaming convention. So I'm sure Essen has morphed and changed as well. So it'd be interesting to see how that's happened. Jump to comments. All right. Habeas mentions, doesn't the fact that so many of these conventions sell out so quickly and that they are so packed mean that many people have decided that yes, they are worth it? I would agree. I think that they not only sell it quickly and they're packed, but they are continuing to grow. So we haven't hit a plateau yet in the amount of interest in these conventions, which is really, really fascinating. I know that lots of times the reason why they sell it so quickly and the reason why they're so packed is because they reach the limits of the space they have available. So lots of these conventions, like Gen Con and stuff in particular, will have to sign contracts with their venue, multiple year contracts. And so they're stuck in that location even if they outgrow it. And they can't move even if they wanted to. So it's kind of a supply and demand thing and trying to gauge what the future has and be able to get the price for the venue. And sometimes they can only get the price they want by having a multiple year contract. But anyway, the point is that, yeah, I agree. Many people have decided that they are worth it and worth the travel. And more people, it seems, are continuing to know they're worth it because they're continuing to grow. Oh, Kabuki Kid mentions about the cruise here. The cruise con is nice because it doesn't have to be 100% gaming. It can be broken up by doing cruise stuff too, making it nice for bringing the family, the spouses, etc., who aren't gamers. Yeah, I think that's one of the lures of a cruise convention is that it seems like it may be more family friendly because of all the other things to do on that big old boat. Let's see here. Oh, another jump. And I lost my search. So I'm going to search one more time. We have like 10 minutes left here in the show, so I'm going to find my place. Paying the game, oh wow, we jumped way back in the chat. Oh no. Okay, we're almost up to the cruise. Here we go, I found it. Trevor asks, is this a chat or just listen to Chaz segment? Well, to answer your question from the chat, unfortunately, this is just a listen to Chaz segment until... forget it. That wasn't even a good joke. Forget that joke. And let's continue on to the next portion of the chat here. It's a chat. Okay. Faramir the Ranger mentions, why travel to multiple game conventions per year? There's a reason why they are all over the world. Just like plays and musicals, the convention comes to you. I think that a lot of it is, like I said, every convention has a different experience and a different environment. I think it's to experience those different environments. There's nothing else like Gen Con that I've ever experienced. And I know nothing locally would ever come to me that is like Gen Con. Don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but for better or worse, that is how it is. David mentions, how different is your perspective now? You will mostly be working compared to just going as a member of the gaming public. Well, that's a good question, David. The conventions I'm going to this year, where I will be working as opposed to just a member of the gaming public, are the same conventions that I went to as someone who's working last year. Gen Con, I was working the Dice Tower booth. This year at Gen Con, I'm going as a member of the Dice Tower team again. Origins, I'm going as a member of the Dice Tower team. BGG Con, I went just as myself. But Dice Tower Con, both last year and this year, I'm going just as a member of the gaming community to have fun too. So I can't really answer that question because the conventions I'm going to work are the same conventions I've been going to work before, and the ones I'm going for leisure are the same ones I've been going to leisure. So I don't have a comparison of the same convention with the two aspects. I will say this: if I wasn't going to work in some capacity, I probably wouldn't be going to Gen Con because just my own personal tastes. Now that I have experienced the circus of Gen Con with its 60,000 people and stuff, I probably wouldn't go to Gen Con just as me to hang out. I would probably only go to Gen Con as a member of a team working and meeting people and having stuff to do there. And that's just me and the way that type of crowd stuff. It's just the way I want to work in that type of crowd, if that makes any sense. Sasha mentions, meeting friends is the most important reason for me to go to conventions and playing some games and buying lots and lots of games, of course, but friends are still number one. And Pangor mentions, I go to Essen also to see and what will end up on my wish list for Christmas. Oh, that's a good point. Browsing and seeing what's coming out to find out what you want to invest in later. Not so much buying immediately, but seeing what's worth it. Also to try out what's worth hunting down. That's true. It's always nice to be able to demo. There's always publishers with stuff that's coming up that's being demoed that's coming out later and prototypes and new upcoming releases. So it's another thing to see there, and you can kind of find out what's worth. You can see firsthand in person what's going to be on your wish list to buy. Ethan mentions, my wife and I went to Gen Con and Gamehole Con in Madison, Wisconsin last year and had a blast at both. It helped that we weren't with friends. No, it helped that we went with friends who had been before to show us the ropes. That's a good point. There's a convention in California, I believe it is, called KublaCon, which is a fairly good-sized one that I've considered going to, but I have a friend in our local gaming conventions here in town that has gone to KublaCon, and I thought, if I went to KublaCon, I probably would still kind of just go on my own. I wouldn't want to go as a group or have a companion because I'd want that freedom to be able to go in whatever direction I wanted to go. But when I'm there, I'd probably want to hook up with that friend at KublaCon if he's there. So to kind of have him help me get familiar with what's available and how it works down there. So even if you don't travel with someone, meeting up with someone there that knows the ropes, that's a good tactic. I like that. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions here. Here we go. Sorry, jumping comments here. 20-sided turtle. That's a lot of sides for a turtle. 20-sided turtle mentions, I played Cosmic with the Vassal at Grand Con last year, and it was fun. Yeah, that's another aspect of conventions. Lots of times you will have the opportunity to even interact and play games with these people that you never would have before. BGG Con especially, I was really surprised at how it was one big, huge gaming hall for the most part. There were some small rooms that were quieter, which was nice, but one big gaming hall, and you'd walk through and you'd pass just, hey, I recognize him from YouTube, and hey, I know that person's podcast, and just would walk through, and everyone was just playing games together. It was really cool, and that's an experience, an environment that you won't be able to get anywhere else other than a convention. So even small ones like Grand Con. Joshua mentions, is buying something at a convention worth it? People often buy games that will be out in a few months, but they want it now. But with shipping costs, markup, etc., is it worth it? Oh, Joshua, that is the $1 million question, isn't it? It's going to be different for everybody. I know when I have obtained games at conventions, there's been a couple that people have asked me to pick up for them, or I just gave in and wanted to get. And getting them home from the convention can be an obstacle in and of itself. Either making it fit into your suitcase, or bringing an extra suitcase and checking that as an extra piece of luggage, or shipping it home to yourself, oftentimes can be just as expensive as the games themselves in shipping. But it really depends. Some people will say, it's worth it to get it early. Some people will say it's not worth it. Some people will say it's worth it to support the publishers because you're buying the games directly from the publishers instead of through a third-party middleman. So it's different to everybody, and everybody has their own rationale. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to that. So whatever approach you want to take. Oh, 2020 Turtle also mentions that I went to Gen Con every year when it was in Milwaukee for the exhibitors hall and all the unique swag that was there. Now that stuff is ubiquitous on the internet, so I prefer smaller cons. Exclusivity. That is definitely something that conventions can offer, but with the advent of the internet, some of the perks and swag and stuff, and even the interactions with people, like we're doing right here, may not be as exclusive to the convention experience as they once were. All right, we have time for one more good question here. I'm going to scroll down. Joshua mentions, would you ever offer your name to a board game convention? I think there were some extra letters thrown into this. I'm thinking of a Northwest convention with you and Suzanne from Board Game Breakfast. Call it ChanCon for Chaz and Suzanne with special guests Dukes of Dice. That's an interesting question. I'd have to think about that because I'm sure that there's the potential that would drive away just as many people as it would bring in. So let's stew on that one. And let's find one more good question here. Let's actually highlight the chat again so that we can see the questions. And I've totally lost my place. And I'm looking for just one more question. And, offer your name. Hey, I found my place. And it looks like the chat was tapering off. So since the chat is tapering off anyway, it looks like we actually caught up on questions this time. Excellent. Unless someone wants to throw me one more quick question in the chat. I'm down at the end of the chat now. Unless someone wants to throw that extra chat question my way, I am going to start to wrap up by reminding everyone that there they are. There's these fancy time little YouTube channels called Paradise and the Dice Tower, where you are welcome to subscribe and also join the conversation with us on Twitter and Facebook to continue all things board game related with more news and reviews and commentary about board games and the industry. And until the next time that we have such type of a conversation back and forth with you, I, and the chat area, I just want to let you know that I've been Chaz Marler, and I want to thank you all for playing this episode of the Metagame with me. Until next time, take care, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.